everybody. Today we're going to be going over the Hashketball review. Had to spit out some gum real quick. Sweet. So we're going to be using Chris Fallen's submission here. And we're just going to go. We're going to look at what he did. Then we're going to see if we can maybe refactor some stuff. Cool. So in my throwaway folder, I am going to go to his website here, or the GitHub link. I'm going to copy the SSH link here, and I'm hitting that clipboard. And I'm going to type in git clone, and then I'm going to paste that in there, and I'm going to press enter. Oh, I have to remove the one that I was looking at. So I'm going to remove that, and we'll do it again. Cool. Does anybody know what RMRF does?
Yeah. You delete the folder and everything in it, and it doesn't prompt you. So no take-backsies.
So I was just removing the copy that I already made from before. I'm going to just start nice and fresh here. Cool. Also, something that I didn't say, like this is my first class with y'all. So like, just feel free to interrupt whenever the hell you don't understand something. Ask as many questions as you want. If you're like completely stuck, it's worth throwing it out there. I might not just be like, hey, pull up your screen, or hey, let's not entertain this idea right now. But feel free to throw out the question, because I would rather get that feedback of like where everybody's at. Feel free to ask me to slow down, all that stuff, just so you're completely aware and you feel comfortable like asking me to do that. I'm cool with it. When I was a student, I fired off more questions than any student I've ever had. So like I deserve to be fired at questions constantly. So if anybody feels guilty about that, don't. I'll let you know if it's going to be more of like a thing that I'm coding in front of you rather than explaining stuff. Because sometimes there's merit in those too. Awesome. We're cloning this down. Now I'm going to go ahead and we're going to open up that directory in code. So I'm going to type in code, and then I'm going to start typing AD. And hey, look at that. Since there was only one thing in my directory that started with ADD, and when I pressed tab, it auto-completed all of that. My advice to all of you would be to use that autocomplete as much as possible, because what that means is that you're not going to make spelling errors as often, right? It helps your workflow get a lot faster, all that good shit. So just use it whenever you can. Cool. I'm going to open that up. And now my Visual Studio Code is opened. Now, with my workflow, if I use a terminal, I like to hit Control and backtick, and it pulls up this thing at the bottom. It usually takes a long time to load the first time you open it, and then after that, you can kind of toggle it pretty quick. See? But this terminal is the exact same thing as my other terminal. It's just that it's like attached to my VS Code window. But like if you look here, I can go and CD into my home directory. I can move through stuff, CD to my throwaway directory. It's literally just a different visualization for the same terminal. And on top of that, some things work a little smoother. So for example, in here, let's say I type something really long. If I hold Alt and delete, it deletes a whole word. And if I hold Command and delete, it deletes a whole line, which is pretty nice. And it won't do that in iTerm. So I like this terminal a lot. It's pretty easy to toggle on and off once you know that command. Anyways, I know that none of that had anything to do with Hashketball. Okay, so let's see. Why don't we go ahead, and now we're going to start getting into this refactor here. The very first thing I want to do is maybe check, hey, does this code work? Did Chris submit code that functions? So I'm going to do that first. I'm just going to type in learn. Press enter. Bam! Good job, Chris. Everybody give Chris a round of applause. Good work. Awesome. So now let's see what code Chris made here. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that terminal because holy shit, that thing is taking up a lot of space. And right off the bat, the very first thing that I noticed is that this game hash is all the way on top of this file, which to me, no offense, Chris, it's a little ugly. I think we could do it better. Okay. So what are we going to do? We're going to highlight all of this and we're just going to delete it. But we're cut it so that way it's on your clipboard. And then we're we're going to make a new file for this thing. We could call it gamehash.rb. So now I'm going to, oh, whoops. We're going to, I think I just got to do that. Cool, bam. Sorry, don't worry. That's a weird thing. Don't stress about whatever I just did. Awesome. So now we have a whole game hash file, right? And how do I pull that file in to my Hashketball file? Does anybody have an idea?
Require relative.
Yeah, fuck yeah, Lou. Require relative is how we import other files. So I'll usually start a require relative with the // type syntax. So if I do a // what does that dot mean? Phil.
Back to your root directory.
It means what?
Back to the top folder of this directory.
I think I can get a better answer. Mel, do you mind maybe have a better answer for that?
Sorry, I was yelling at the Pomsky. What was the question?
What does this // mean in my require relative?
I don't know. I just know that it's necessary to call the file.
So what this // means is look inside of the current directory. So for example, if Hashketball is here, it's going to look at anything on this line, right? Now, let's say I wanted to go into the spec file. I might have to go require relative and then look into spec / and then whatever. But since game hash is on the same like indentation as Hashketball, if I do // and I start typing in game hash, it should autocomplete too because your VS Code is pretty smart in that way. But it's saying, hey, look in this current directory for a file called game hash. Does anybody know how I would look in the directory maybe outside? Like, let's say that I had access to one folder outside of here. How would I look in the folder outside of where Hashketball is located?
I'll take a guess. It's //
Close. It's actually just //
All right.
Cool. Let's not stress too much about that right now, but I think if you just start to get exposed to those concepts, that'd be good. So now we're requiring in the game hash. Well, fortunately, because we have these tests written, I can just go ahead and learn again, and if it works, I didn't fuck anything up. Hey, it still runs. Good stuff. And look, we just saved. Now these Hashketball like functions are just Hashketball functions. It's not including the data for all of that. Awesome. That's the first refactor I might do there. Cool.
I have a quick question.
Stuff just because. Why not clean this up? All right. So let's. Well, go for it.
Yeah, sorry. Is there any difference between require relative and calling it by saying like file equals file.read or whatever?
Good question. Require relative only works on Ruby files. File.read reads any file type. So you have a file type, it reads the text off of that file. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
Great question. Great question. Any other questions? Cool. All right. Out of curiosity, let's take a look at this game hash for a second. Okay. Did anybody say to themselves, I have this huge array of players, right? And I want to take this array of players and I want to combine them. So that way all of my players can be accessed, like all the home players, all the away players are combined into one big array. Did anybody else do that? Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. When we need that function, we'll get back to it. Let's not talk about that until we need it. Cool. Let's start with, we will refactor these two functions pretty soon. But let's start with the ones that are on the learn test. So if I recall right, the first one on the learn test is the game hash, okay? Does anybody have questions on the game hash? Because that was more of just like a, can you read slowly and understand what it's asking you to do? Can I get some fist to 5 on how actually making the game hash felt, and if I need to go over that? I see a 5. Does anybody need me to go over the game hash? Marissa, Destiny, throw out a fist of 5. Well, I don't see any. Cool, nice. Okay, all right. So if everyone's a 5, we're not going to bother with that.
Sorry, John, I did have one question.
Sure.
Why put the game hash in a def statement as opposed to just writing game hash equals?
Great question again. So part of that is because of RSpec. So RSpec, it's easier to test a method than it is to test a variable. That's part of it. So when you write your tests, it's easier to test a function. The other part of that is also, if I import this file, right? Actually, in general, this is kind of a trippy Ruby thing, but let me see if I could pull up a REPL here just to show y'all. Let's say, has anyone ever messed with REPL? REPL's just a fun little way to test out code. It's just easy testing environment, like to test out some simple code. I'm just going to make a hash. I'm going to say hash equals this. Name is going to be John. Cool, that's my hash. Let's do puts hash. Bam, I printed this hash out over here. Not too crazy. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a method. Def, I'm going to call it print hash. And here I just want to do the same thing. But the thing is, my variable is defined here, but I'm printing it in here. Does anybody know what's going to happen here? Anyone want to take a guess on what's going to happen when I run this? And also, I need to invoke that function, right? So I need to type in print hash. And now I should probably fix this to be Ruby convention. Ruby convention is always snake cased, which means that the thing that connects the words is this underscore here. But cool. Anybody have an idea of what they think's going to happen when I run this?
You're going to get an undefined variable?
Boom. Oh, what the fuck is that? Whoa. I have no idea why that happened, to be 100% with you. I wish I could tell you what was going on there, but yeah, usually this would say undefined. I think this might be a weird REPL thing, but this is not really defined in here. However, if I were to change this to, instead of being a variable, to instead be a function that returns, or I'm sorry, a method that returns that hash, now it works more like we would expect.
I have a question about this.
Sure.
So like what happened before, they told us that, like, you know, puts and print, right? Like it outputs text to the screen, but the thing that it actually returns is nil. So like, how come you were able to change that behavior by doing what you just did?
Yeah, so normally this, I think in a regular Ruby compiler, before I fix this, this would have broke it. But there's something weird about REPL behaves a little differently sometimes than when you do Ruby, like in an actual Ruby file with a Ruby compiler. I think there's like some special compiler here that makes certain things act weird. But in a regular one, I was expecting it to break. Normally, if you have a variable, you can't, the scope for that variable goes away when you're inside of a function in Ruby, not in all programming languages. In fact, not in JavaScript. However, this method is accessible inside of this method. That's partially why we're kind of doing that with the game hash. So we have this game hash, and if we store it as a function, then when we import it, it's you can access it from inside of another method. Does that make sense? Does that clear things up?
Sorry, and just like, is there any reason to do that opposed to just passing in the game hash as an argument in a function?
Yes, but that's a complex, like, that's a more of like, when you start getting into these questions of, oh, what's the right way to code? You start delving into these fields that are like giant nerd wars on how you do stuff. And it's a lot more complex than the scope of this conversation would allow, if that makes sense. Cool. Yeah. Also, but more simply put, these tests are asking for it this way, so you have to do it this way. That makes sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Awesome. So, sweet. All right, let's got that working. Nice. First, what's the first function here that actually matters? This num point score. Okay, so now we're immediately getting off into this players equals get players. This is some code that Chris wrote. And what this does is it takes all of the home players and all of the away players and lumps them together in one big array. Can anybody have an idea on why I might want to make a method that does that?
So you don't have to repeat it every single time.
For the next ones.
Yeah, but why do I even have to do it in any of the functions in the first place? What's the functionality of me combining those two together?
It keeps you from having to like write code that has to dive. So you don't have to search every time to get like a home team and then the away team.
Exactly. It allows me to iterate through one giant array of players in order to find the right one. And we're going to see how elegant that could make our code. For now, we're just going to assume that get players works, right? So get players, and I just want to put like a little reminder here. Get players returns a huge array of all of the players, right? Cool. Now let's talk about how this works. He's going through each player, and this is actually a major refactor that I would do. So if I have all of these players, what data type is one of the players in this hash? And actually what I probably could do here is a little split screen action. Here we're going to pull up the game hash. Cool. So what data type is one player?
A hash?
A hash. Okay. My next question is, if I do players.each, what does this player index reference? What does that object become each iteration?
All the info for one player.
All the info for one player. Does anybody know what an index means usually?
An index usually, like the location in an array.
Yeah, so an index is usually a number that represents like a position in an array. So actually, this would be the first refactor I would do. I would say, okay, this probably shouldn't be called player index. I would maybe call it just a player. And I would refactor it there. I'd refactor it here. And I would refactor it here.
Is there a hotkey to select all of the same
There
terms?
is.
And then
I'm just working in Vim, so it doesn't work the same in Vim. Here I can actually switch. I can turn off that for a second. Let's see.
Can you also show us how to do undo? And
Yes. Here, I gotta reload this. Awesome. Now I'm just working in regular mode. Cool. So if I have player here, I can highlight player. And I hit Command D, and it highlights the next instance of player. Now the problem is that it highlights all instances of player, so it's highlighting all that stuff that I don't need. But that is called multi-cursor. We'll do it again for another refactor. Awesome. So undo is going to be Command Z, which I can't undo because of I reloaded VS Code for Vim right now. But undo is Command and Z, and redo is Command Shift Z. Cool. All right, so now this looks a little more readable. I'm saying for each player, if the player's name equals, oh shit, this says player too. How do I distinguish between each player of the players array and whatever I put in here? Let me ask a question. Let's actually throw a binding.pry in here. Yeah. Who here? Raise your hand if you've messed around with binding.pry. Cool. We're going to mess around with it more. Awesome. So I'm going to throw a binding.pry in here, and we're going to run learn again. And hopefully we get stuck. We got stuck. Hooray. All right. So if I type in player, what do we expect here?
Whatever the argument was passed, like who we're looking for.
What argument do you think got passed into this? What data type is it?
The name of the player.
Yeah, I had to see what they're
It's a
looking for.
string that represents
It's
the
just-
name of the player, right? So I might actually, for the sake of clean code, I might actually call this thing player name. And now I can distinguish between the player object in my players array and the player name. Cool. Now, is this a little, who is confused by what I just did? Anybody? Cool. I know that this is just renaming variables, and this is one of those things that I think people overlook in the beginning, but you can get so much out of being smart about the variables that you name. May not seem like it, but you can get a lot out of it. To me, this reads way better than it did before. I was actually confused when I first opened this one up and looked at it, just because I saw player index here. And whenever I see index, I expect a number. So when I saw player index, I was looking at it and I'm like, oh, okay, player indexed. And then I saw someone indexing player index. And I'm like, wait a minute, you can't index a number. And like, by the way, everybody makes these kinds of mistakes. So if anybody's like, like feeling like down about they did something similar, like I did this shit all the time. This part is harder than it looks. It's like, oh, just renaming variables to be smart. That part it can be hard. Cool.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
So like, is it better to name variables literally, or is it better to name variables as to what they do in your specific function? So like if I'm like doing a dot each on a hash, is it better to name my variables key and value, or is it better to name them like what the actual result of key and value are?
When you're iterating over a hash, I might call it key and value. If you're iterating over an array, there's usually a smarter term for it. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. That's something that it's like not always easy to answer that question. Like there's certain times where it's pretty difficult to come up with a good name for those block variables. Just try to do your best always to make something that's easier for someone else to read. What you definitely don't want to do is be like, and I promise you on my mod 1 code challenge, I was still doing this. I was doing like, oh, I would put, because I thought I was cool because I came from an engineering background. I would do that. I would put N in there. And then I'm like, oh, cool. I just did it in way less characters than someone else. I'm smart. And all it does is really just confuse people. So it's like definitely a good habit to get out of where, or better yet, a good habit to get into where you start asking yourself, what is this thing right here? Like, I think at first it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to call this thing a player hash, for example, right? Where it's like, oh, okay, that might be a little bit more specific to me on what's going on here. But I think as you program a little more often, maybe like player would make sense. I don't know. There's not one right way of coding, but in general, like the thought that you put into it, you just don't want to be misleading, if that makes sense. Cool. And now I can look at this, and everything kind of boils down to this line. Player and then player name is equal to player name. That's kind of like the condition that everything's dependent on. But all that factored in, we want to start learning how to not use each statements. So what are we doing here? We're going over all these players and we're returning the one that matches this condition, right? Well, we have an enumerable that does that for us. Does anybody know what that enumerable is? What enumerable finds something inside of an array and spits that thing out?
Dot find.
Dot find. Anybody know how dot find works?
It takes a collection and turns it into a singular.
Yeah, it turns it into a single object from that collection, right? So what gets returned in a dot find? And I'm going to just take this dot each, and we're going to call it dot find. Oh, man. What gets returned in a dot find? What do I put here?
A Boolean true or false?
I love that answer. It's not technically 100% correct,
Okay.
but something that evaluates to truthy or falsy depending on which player I'm on. Let's think about what happens with a dot find in general. Let's start with a simple example. We're going to do a cool array, right? And then this cool array, we're just going to make it, a cool array is going to go 1, 2, this is not really that cool of an array. I'm going to be 100% honest. 2, 3, 4, 5. Great. And I want to find, let's say I want to find the first even number in there, right? I can do first even number equals a cool array, and then dot find do types. I'll finish off that do there in a second. So here I'm going to say for each number, I just want to return the first number that evaluates true or false. So let's say I'll do in here number dot, I think you could do even. There's a check for even.
Don't you need to require math?
What?
Don't you need to require math for that?
I don't think so. A dot even question mark I think works. Dot even. And now what I'll do is I am going to put my first even number. See if it worked. Hey, it worked. So let's talk about what happens. This thing is like a loop. So first it says number equals 1. When number equals 1, it checks. Is this number even? No. Okay, move on to the next one. 2. Is this number even? Yes. Okay, return that and then exit the loop. Does that make sense? That's how dot find works. So now we're going to do the same kind of thing here, but what do we think the condition might be on how we find this player? Chris, I'll give you a chance to do a refactor on your own code.
It would be like player brackets colon name double equals player name.
Like this?
I think so.
I want you to take a second to look at what one player looks like.
So you want to,
You're so close.
oh, player, yeah, colon player underscore name.
Yep. Cool. Let's give this a save and check it out. See if we broke anything. I can exit this pry with 3 exclamation marks. I'm going to do learn again. Oh, we fucked something up.
Well, I think isn't that going to return the whole hash rather than the number of points scored?
That's exactly what it is. Yep, we want the number of points scored. That was silly of me. So then what you can do is you can actually treat all of this like an object, and whatever this becomes, I can just chain a thing off of that. So I could actually right here just say, what is it? What is the thing? Points.
Just points.
Yep. And now I can index that directly at points. Give that a save. Bam. 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 We passed it. Hooray. And actually, to refactor this a little further, we could even start this as get players. And now we have something that I think looks a lot cleaner. What do y'all think? Nice. Now, one of my questions is, do we have any other? So here I have a shoe size of a player, right? So in order to do that, I have to find that player, right? Do you think maybe I could make a function for finding a player so that way I don't have to rewrite all of this every time? What do we think about that? So that might be a good idea. So what I might do is make a function called find player by name, and then go ahead, copy and paste all of that. And actually, and then here I could just do find player by name, player name, indexed at points. Let's see if this works. Uh-oh. Wrong number of arguments. Given 0, expected 1. Oh, what did I forget? What does this error statement mean? Wrong number of arguments. Given 0, given 1, expected 0. Who can tell me what that means?
You gave an argument to find player by name by accident?
Cool. So how do I fix? Well, did I do that by accident? Is that the part that's messed up?
No, you just did let it accept an argument.
Yeah, I need to make a player name argument here. And in Ruby, these like parentheses are totally optional, so you can totally get rid of them. But yeah. But we're going to leave them on because I think it's easier to read with them on. And especially when you're noobs, it's totally worth just leaving on there. I don't think it makes it like much cleaner to get rid of them. So now, let's see if we did it. I don't know that I saved. I think I forgot to save. Oh, I guess I did save because it works. Sweet. Anybody have questions on that so far? If you're feeling lost, shout out something. I want to hear you talk it out.
I have a question. Does the order of the definitions matter? So like, let's say you wanted to find a player by name, but you had like a definition above that method that you just drew up. Is that not going to call on the method below it?
The order of these definitions does not matter.
Okay.
Let's actually not call them definitions. Let's call them methods.
Oh, sorry, methods.
That order does not matter in Ruby. As long as they're like on the same, like this is part of the reason why properly indented code is fucking fantastic, because I know all of these are at like the same level of nesting. So they all have awareness of each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions?
So this method that you made, the find player by name, now you can use that for shoe size or
Bingo.
Cool.
So now what am I going to do here?
Be find player by name, player name, and then bracket shoe size.
Excellent. See how like sometimes making those extra little helper functions can be like, holy shit, that's a lot easier to read. Let's give it a look. Did it work? Uh-oh. What did I mess up? Oh, it should just be, who can tell me what I messed up?
Should be just shoe.
Yeah, it should be just shoe. That's also not what the error says, I don't think.
You just have the wrong. You didn't pass in the correct variable.
Yeah.
Correct argument name. You have player, and then you change it to player name.
Oh, yep, that's right. Really, I think we should refactor this to say player name for consistency. And then this should be shoe. Cool.
Can you quickly go back over the get players?
Yeah.
Like initial.
Yeah, I'd love to. That learning these enumerables is going to help you all so much. Cool. Define player by name, that one?
No, like the actual get players that you use inside of find players by name.
Ah, great. Great question. Let's look at what this does. Get players. I don't like that this works in Ruby, but it does. Who can tell me what happens if you add two arrays together in Ruby?
Puts the second array inside of the first array.
No, I think it actually just returns a new array that's a combination of the both of them. So this is called array concatenation. I usually prefer to see array.concat another array. Let's take a look at it in an IRB. So an IRB is a great way to just fuck around with Ruby and see what the hell is going on. So I'm in here and I'm just going to go ahead and type 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to do .concat because I want to show you what concatenation is. And I am going to concatenate 4, 5, and 6. So what I did was I took one array and a second array, and I basically combined them into equaling one long array. That actually in Ruby, not in all languages, in fact, most languages do not do this. If you do 1, 2, 3 plus 4, 5, 6, it does the same exact thing. Okay. So now looking at this base example, let's give another shot at this get players method.
What does merge do compared to concat?
I have no idea. I've never used merge. Let's look it up. It might be the same thing. Merge two arrays. I don't even, is there even a merge on here? Is it like dot merge or something like that?
Yeah, dot merge. Maybe it only works with the hash.
Don't worry about dot merge for now. You don't need that anytime soon. Maybe it'll help you in some weird coding problem, but you'll probably forget it unless you do those all the time. And you may not like Ruby after you learn JavaScript anyways, so I wouldn't stress too much about it. If you want to go down that rabbit hole, you totally can. I just won't do it in a class, but if you want, I'll even go down that rabbit hole with you. Cool. All right, sweet. So now that we have this, what is game hash indexed at home, indexed at players? It's this array, right? This array of players. And then game hash indexed at away, indexed at players is this array. So all we're doing is we're taking all of the home players and all of the away players and making one big array. Does that make sense? Was that Blake that asked that? I can't remember.
No, it was me. You got it. You're good.
Oh, it was Phil? Okay, cool. I don't know why I thought it was Blake. My bad. I'm getting to know y'all. This is new. Cool. All right. Does that make sense? So that makes sense now? Cool. Awesome. Sweet. Let's do another one. Team names. Cool. What is this? Is team names one of the required ones? Yep. Returns the team names. Cool. And it returns it in an array. It looks like, is that what it wants? Let's see. Okay. This is a way of doing it. There's another way you could have done it, but this totally works. So he created an array, and then he pushed the home and the away in there. Another thing he could have done. Let's say this thing returns an array, right? Another thing you totally could do is just make an array, make the first element game hash indexed at home indexed at team name, and then game hash indexed at away indexed at team name, and that could have done the trick just as easily without any pushing or anything like that. It's like just saying create an array. The first value is this team name. The second value is this team name. Does that make sense? Is anybody confused by that? Let's make sure that it works. Oops. Cool. You passed. Hooray. Nice. So that's a little simpler, and also good, not a bad time to just show y'all. Sometimes you will see things. In general, in programming, we like to program vertically rather than horizontally. So if we have something long, we like to extend it out in a way where it becomes more readable vertically. So this, although it looks a lot different, is actually the same thing. It's just expanded into like a more vertical format. I think it looks a little nicer because now I'm just saying, oh, okay, the 0 index of this array is game hash home team name. The index 1 is game hash away team name. So I'm going to give this a save, and I'm going to run it again just to prove, hey, it worked. Hey, it worked. Cool. Nice. Next one, we got player numbers. Cool. What's going on here? What is player numbers supposed to do? Return the player jersey numbers. Okay, so is it supposed to do that for all of the players? Looks like it. Cool. All right. I'm going to give people, I'm going to put a minute on the clock. Actually, I'm going to put 2 minutes on the clock. And I want people to point out as many things that could be fixed in this as possible. Okay? I want people to come up with some ideas. And after 2 minutes, I'm going to give you another minute to Slack me that answer. Awesome. I'm going to set a little timer here. Ready? Set timer for 2 minutes.
Your timer is set for 2 minutes.
Wait, so what are we trying to find again? I'm sorry.
I want y'all to figure out anything that you think would make sense as a refactor here.
Okay.
And Slack me some ideas. What things might
I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is only supposed to return the numbers for like a given team.
Yeah, all the numbers for a given team.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yep. Ooh, I'm getting some Slack messages. They're rolling in. Gonna take that. Move it over. Bam, bam. Mhm. Shit. Try like be qualitative rather than just send me a I can't read all that code that quickly. I'm not gonna lie. So just be like some ideas, like, hey, what could be changed here? And actually, I'm gonna Slack a bunch of y'all. I'm gonna just kind of respond with some messages. Oh my god, this is gonna be a lot. Typing practice time. Let's go. There's a whole bunch. There's a very open-ended question, so there's a whole bunch of things that it can be. Like what I would do is maybe provide a list of things that you would change. Qualitative though. This is fun. I get to practice typing. Cool. Sweet. All right. So I don't spend this whole time just responding to messages. We're just going to go ahead and jump right into it. The first thing right off the bat that I think would be the easiest refactor would be, I'm going to change this to say team name. Because now it just, to me, looks a lot cleaner. And hey, you know what? Let's use that multi-cursor like I promised I would. We're just going to refactor this. Bam. Except for I don't want to hit that one. So actually, this is not a good use for multi-cursor. We're just going to do it there and here. Cool. Sweet. So hopefully that still works. The next thing that really kind of itches me on this is the fact that we're using a dot each. So what am I doing? I'm using a dot each and I'm pushing into this numbers array. Does anybody know? Let's say I have an array of players and I want to turn them into an array of numbers. Does anybody know which iterable that we have access to which enumerable allows us to take an array of things and transform it into an array of transformed things. Does anybody know which enumerable allows us to do that?
Map.
Map. So I want everybody to say this to themselves. The purpose, out loud. You can keep your microphone muted, unmute your microphone. The purpose of a map is to transform all the elements of an array. Say it out loud. This looks hilarious from my end. Cool. Great. The purpose of a map is to transform all of the elements of an array. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. Okay. This is my cool array. I just want to double all of them. So now, instead of a dot find, I'm going to use a dot map. And now the difference is, instead of returning something that evaluates to truthy or falsy, I return the new value for each item. So for example, let's change this from being first even number to being, we'll call it new value, we'll call it transformed array. And I just want to return 1 for each of these. Well, let's see what this outputs. Bam, I got an array of 1s. Why? Because for each element here, all I did was return a 1, so that's what it became in the mapped over version. Oh shit, it looks like y'all got to go to another class. Whoopsie. We could continue a refactor tomorrow if y'all want, or something like that. Go to your enumerables lesson now. You'll get a lot out of that anyways. But yeah, go to that enumerable lesson armed with just like seeing how efficiently like these enumerables allow us to refactor stuff. If you want, I can refactor this pretty quick, but I'm not going to do that. Go to Damien's class. Have a great day.
John, quick question before we
Sure.
go. Where do we find the recordings that you guys do?
I'm going to post this onto the Flatiron Firebase site, and I'll try to get that on ASAP.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Y'all know where
Anyways.
that is?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
The Firebase site is like your beacon of hope. That's where everything is.
Sounds good. Thanks,
Cool.
man.
Thank you.
Good to
Thanks,
do.
John. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks,
All right, y'all
John.
have a good one.
Bye.
Peace.
Thank you, John.
No problemo.
Okay.
Later.
John.